75 cents of every defense dollar Canada spends used to go straight to the United States. Not anymore. Today, Carney announced that within the next decade, 70% of Canada's defense contracts will go to Canadian companies. That means American defense contractors are about to lose their most reliable customer. $90 billion over the next 10 years. Gone. And this is not a normal trade dispute. This is Canada ending 70 years of dependence on American weapons and military supply chains. And it is happening because Trump made real partnership impossible. But here is what most people are missing. This is the biggest shift in North American defense relations since NATO was created. Let me show you exactly what just happened. February 17th, Montreal. Carney stood in front of Canada's top defense industry leaders at Sea Incorporated and unveiled Canada's first ever defense industrial strategy. The plan is massive. $6.6 billion over the next 5 years, 125,000 new jobs by 2035. Defense industry revenues projected to rise by 240%. But the real headline is what comes next. Canada is restructuring how it buys military equipment forever. The strategy is built around one simple framework: build, partner, buy in that order. Build means Canada develops and manufactures defense equipment inside Canada whenever possible. Drones, cyber warfare systems, Arctic surveillance tech, naval components, AI systems. If Canada can build it domestically, it will. Partner means Canada works with trusted allies when it cannot build alone. But here is the key detail: not with the United States. Instead, Canada is looking to Europe, Sweden, and the United Kingdom, countries willing to offer technology transfer and allow Canadian production, by means purchasing from foreign suppliers only after exhausting the first two options. And that is where American defense contractors now fall. Not the default, the last resort. Right now, 43% of Canadian defense contracts go to Canadian companies. Carney's goal is 70% by 2035. That is a massive transfer of wealth. Tens of billions of dollars moving away from US contractors and into Canadian manufacturing. Carney openly explained why. Canada relied too heavily on geography and other countries to protect it. That created vulnerabilities Canada can no longer afford, and dependencies Canada can no longer sustain. The strategy also identifies 10 sovereign capabilities. These are areas where Canada will maintain domestic production no matter the cost. The full list has not been released, but it includes Arctic surveillance, cyber defense, military artificial intelligence, critical naval systems. For these sectors, Canada will designate national champions, Canadian companies that will receive guaranteed contracts, research funding, and protection from foreign takeover. They will own the intellectual property. They will build the systems inside Canada, and they will employ Canadian workers. But the numbers only tell half the story. To understand how serious this is, you have to look at what the United States is losing. Canada spends about $15 billion per year on defense procurement. Historically, 75% of that goes to American companies. That is roughly $11.2 billion per year flowing to firms like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, General Dynamics, Boeing. Carney's target shifts Canada toward 70% domestic procurement. And if even half of the remaining 30% goes to Europe, US contractors could drop to around 15% of Canadian procurement. That is only $2.25 billion per year, meaning American firms could lose about $9 billion annually. Over 10 years, that is $90 billion. And the biggest loss could be the F-35. Canada's F-35 procurement is tied to a $27 billion program. But Carney's strategy openly signals interest in alternatives, including the SOB Gripen E, a Swedish fighter that could be manufactured in Canada with full technology transfer. If Canada switches, Lockheed Martin loses tens of billions, and Sweden gains a major North American defense manufacturing foothold. The Gripen also fits Canada's needs better. It is built for harsh environments, short runways, Arctic operations, and lower maintenance costs. Saab offered to build it in Canada. Canadian jobs, Canadian parts, Canadian production, Canadian control. And it is not just fighter jets, missile systems, armored vehicles, surveillance aircraft, naval contracts. Every major deal is now being reviewed under the new build, partner, buy structure. American suppliers are no longer protected. They are competing for contracts they used to automatically win. The ripple effects hit the United States too. American supply chains were built around Canadian orders, component manufacturers in Michigan, maintenance facilities in Ohio, training programs in border states. This will affect jobs across Texas, Georgia, California, Arizona, Massachusetts, Michigan, Ohio. Not immediately. Many existing contracts will continue for years, but the future pipeline is shifting and renewals are no longer guaranteed. But the bigger story is the political collision. Days before Carney unveiled this strategy, Trump signed an executive order launching an America First arms transfer strategy. Trump's goal is to make the United States the global weapons supplier of choice, expand U.S. defense manufacturing, boost American industrial jobs, dominate allied procurement. Canada's response is the opposite. Canada is making the United States the last choice supplier. This is a direct conflict. Both nations want stronger defense industries. Both want manufacturing jobs. Both want less dependence on foreign suppliers. But Canada cannot build its own industry while handing 75% of its budget to American contractors. And America cannot become the world's default supplier if its closest ally is actively walking away. Trump believed pressure would force compliance tariffs on steel. Threats tied to infrastructure like the Gordie Howe Bridge, annexation rhetoric surrounding Greenland, demands for Canadian water and resources. Every move was meant to tighten control. But Carney's answer is independence, not through confrontation, through investment, through industrial rebuilding, through partnerships that exclude Washington. And this fits a clear pattern. Trump threatens tariffs on Canadian lumber. Canada strengthens exports to Europe and China. Trump demands influence over Canadian resources. Canada doubles down on sovereignty. Trump threatens Greenland. Canada signs an Arctic defense pact with Denmark that locks the US out. Now Trump pushes America-first defense manufacturing, and Canada responds by shifting defense procurement away from American firms. Every threat accelerates Canadian diversification. And this defense industrial strategy is the most aggressive step yet. Carney's real goal is strategic autonomy. For decades, Canadian military readiness depended on American supply chains, and that dependence created a crisis. Canadian naval vessels waiting on US parts, Air Force aircraft grounded, Army vehicles stuck in maintenance. Not because Canada lacked funding, because Canada lacked control. Carney's plan changes that. Parts will be made in Canada or sourced through European partners, not dependent on American approval, not delayed by US political decisions. Canada wants a military that can operate when Washington says no. The economic impact is enormous. Defense spending is not just military spending, it is industrial investment. Money sent to American contractors builds American factories and American jobs. Money spent domestically builds Canadian factories and Canadian jobs. Carney's plan projects 125,000 direct defense jobs by 2035, a major expansion of advanced manufacturing, growth in AI, materials, science, and cyber technology. And defense technology always spills into civilian markets. The industrial benefits will multiply. Canada expects defense exports to rise by 50%, making Canadian firms globally competitive. Once exports grow, R&D accelerates, and Canada's defense industry becomes self-sustaining. This shift will change Canada-US relations permanently. For 70 years, Canada's military depended on American suppliers that gave Washington leverage. If the US threatened to cut off equipment, Canada had few alternatives. That leverage is now disappearing. Within a decade, Canada will be able to sustain its defense forces without American support. That means Canada can reject US policy pressure, defend Arctic sovereignty independently, build European partnerships Washington dislikes, say no to Washington without fear. That is what 70% domestic procurement truly means, not isolation, not confrontation. Independence and other countries are watching closely. If Canada successfully reduces dependence from 75% to 15%, the model spreads. Australia, Japan, South Korea. If more allies follow Canada's strategy, American contractors lose volume, costs rise, competition increases, and Trump's America First plan triggers the exact outcome it was meant to prevent. Now we return to where we started. For 70 years, 75 cents of every defense dollar Canada spent went to the United States. Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, General Dynamics, Boeing, reliable revenue, guaranteed contracts, no questions asked. Today, Mark Carney announced that era is over. 70% of Canadian defense contracts will go to Canadian companies within a decade. American contractors are losing $90 billion. Canada's most dependable defense buyer is walking away. Not out of emotion, not out of revenge, but out of strategic calculation. Canada looked at Trump's unpredictability and decided that dependence is no longer acceptable. So Canada is building alternatives, and those alternatives are becoming real. Trump wanted control. He demanded submission. He treated Canadian sovereignty like something negotiable. And Canada responded by building a system where American cooperation is optional. 75 cents of every dollar went to America. Not anymore. Canada just gained independence, and the balance of power in North America will never be the same.